Today, I will show you how the current Generation Z demonstrations against the regime measure up against other such historic incidents that have led to revolutions and history altering outcomes. There's a famous quote that the fact that men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all lessons that history has to teach. I am Jeph Kafka. When such scenes erupted in Kenya last week and this week, everyone in the world took notice. The fact that our MPs voted to impose the Draconian Finance Bill 2024 was not entirely what caused the demos, but it was the proverbial last straw that broke the camel's back. Yet, it has been a series of straws culminating into this one. I'll take you back. During the elections in 2022, the current government campaigned on a platform of the bottoms-up economic model, hustlers first, an economy of mama mbogas and border riders. But immediately upon getting to power, the government removed subsidies on unga and fuel, consequently raising the cost of living that affects the mama mbogas and the border riders. They were told to wait. Things would have to get bad before they got better. They waited. Then, a year later, another contentious finance bill, 2023, the housing levy was introduced. Not a tax, but levied as a tax. The proponents of the bill couldn't even explain it, but the MPs passed it anyway. Then came this year, the Finance Bill 2024. Even before it was debated and voted, people noticed that there was a proposal on VAT on bread, a nickel tax on sanitary pads, a nickel tax on baby diapers, and a motor vehicle tax on the value of the vehicles. People made noise, a noise that the government expected. Then the government retreated. On coming back, they claimed that they have removed taxes on bread, sanitary towels, diapers, and motor vehicles. And it was a chorus that most MPs used on the ground to please the angry mobs. But that was a hoodwink, a smokescreen, a decoy to hide the real components of the finance bill. Let me show you how. One, the bread, the motor vehicle, the diapers, those were suggestions in the finance bill. The suggestions were then dropped. So there were no actual taxes reduced from the above. It's like telling a sick person, I will give you a drug that will make you worse. Obviously, that statement will make him worried, will make him angry, will make him contest the decision. Then you come back later and tell them, I've decided not to give you that drug that will make you worse. And the sick person will feel relieved that you're not going to do what you had suggested you'll do. But in actual sense, that person was expecting a solution, not a suggestion. So the fact that you haven't come up with a drug that will make him better means they shouldn't be celebrated for removing a suggestion that would have given him a drug that would have made him worse. The same way, the fact that it will not tax VAT on bread and motor vehicles shouldn't be celebrated. What taxes have they reduced? Two, there are other things in the finance bill that directly affects the hustlers, the youths, the Gen Z, that are not well talked about. And I want to talk about a few of them Before I give you three case scenarios of actual revolutions that were started and led by the youth, and they worked. First, taxation of incomes from operations of digital marketplace and digital content monetization. So now the Section 3 of the Income Tax Act has been amended in subset 3 to include ride-hailing services, akina Bolt, food delivery services, akina Glovo, freelance and professional services, read your side hustles, rental services, akina Airbnb, and others, including content creation. The bill requires that owners of digital platforms to withhold a 5% of the gross payment made to a resident. This means when Bolt is paying the cab owner, it will deduct 5% first and remit it to KRA. When YouTube is paying a content creator, it will first deduct 5% of the gross, remit it to KRA. When a brand is paying an influencer, it will deduct 5% and deduct it to KRA. And not as a final tax. What this means is that KRA now has a percentage of your income, the 5%, so they're able to calculate what the 100% of that income was. And then they expect you at the end of the year to make a return now on the whole 100% of your income. Another area that touches the youth, the hustlers, the Gen Z, is that the bill proposes to tax all incomes earned by amateur sporting associations. Your local football club, your local amateur boxing club, that will be taxed too. The membership fees that you pay to sustain the operations of that organization, tax money is in that. Another area is money services. The bill proposes a 16% VAT on financial services for financial institutions. Remember, these services already have an excise duty, and they include things like issuing of credit and debit cards, telegraphic money transfers, forex, commissions, etc. An added 16% VAT will mean that these services will be passed on to you, the consumer, and they'll be high. Also, the youth have been indirectly hit by the bill by targeting industries that would be generally considered industries that are employing the current Gen Z, the current youth. For instance, 16% VAT on supply of locally assembled and manufactured mobile phones. I mean, people getting into that area would at least expect the government to be lenient on them to promote that industry. But when a new industry is starting, a new tax is being imposed. A good way to chase investors. 16% VAT on supply of e-mobility. Again, we're getting into an era where the youth are investing in electronic motorized vehicles and motorbikes. But components that lead to the assembly or the making of such items, again, 16% VAT. Then a 20% excise duty on telephones and data services. Internet is going to be more expensive. Then there is the eco levy on smartphones, microphones, loudspeakers, sound recording and producing equipment, monitors, projectors, etc. All these things that the current Gen Z is using to maybe make an income in broadcasting, in content creation, you won't be able to get it at the normal price. There is an eco tax attached to it. So and if you try to hide, the bill proposes that KRA will be able to access your data, that is bank information, M-Pesa information, your call logs. I mean, wherever you can hide your data, KRA has amended the bill on data protection to be able to get to you and enforce the collection of that tax. So here I have only dealt with the punitive taxes that the bill proposes that directly affect the youth and the Gen Z, but there are many more that affect the whole economy at large. So I'll make another video on the bad, the ugly, and somewhat good parts in the finance bill. Granted, taxation is necessary. I mean, it is the major source of government revenue, which it directs to government expenditure for public goods. Public goods, those are goods or services that can't be left to the private sector. Things like the army, roads, schools, hospitals, you get it. But taxation can't and shouldn't be used to cover regime inadequacies, corrupt mindsets, and of course, the West's neo-colonialization. But when you use the taxes towards budgeted corruption, it does not only add insult to injury, but it acts as a catalyst for revolution. Imagine 2.6 billion to renovate the DP's office, 800 million for confidential expenditure, whatever that is, 660 million to renovate the deputy president's residence, 460 million to renovate the Harambee Annex, 250 million for medals, not to mention the amounts that have been allocated to the first and the second ladies. Wizi kwa siri. Huh? Don't you see what is happening here? These are the IMF's and World Bank's structural adjustment reforms that are pushing Kenya Kwanza government. In a public statement, the IMF said the bill is an important step in correcting the course. The IMF's program is anchored on revenue-raising measures. But this is paramount to the government shooting themselves in the foot. Increase in taxes will increase the cost of goods. Increase in the cost of goods will lead to low demand. Loss of demand will lead to loss of jobs. Loss of jobs will lead to low purchasing power. This will end up in a cycle, a slumping economy, and eventually no taxes to collect. In fact, studies show that when countries participate in IMF arrangements, poverty increases and income distribution worsens. Loans with structural conditions increase poverty. In other words, IMF interference will only make the situation worse, but that is where we are at. This makes you wonder, aren't there economists at the Treasury or advisors of the regime who can predict this certain outcome? That's the dilemma. Perhaps the so-called advisors and economists are just marionettes, swinging to every whim of the real puppet masters, the West. But what happens when the citizens can't take it anymore? Punda, akichoka, what next? And the Gen Z are probably and unknowingly following the revolution blueprint of the Young Turks. Let me show you 3 revolutions that were started and led by the young people. Could this be the Gen Z's blueprint? 1. The Young Turks in 1908. These were young youths and students from Turkey, the country. And in the early 1900s, the Young Turks brought down not just a nation, but a more than 600-year-old empire, the Ottoman Empire. And to add to the magnitude of that feat, it was the Ottomans who had ended the over 1500-year reign of the Roman Empire back in 1453. So for that to be brought down not by another empire, but a group of youths and students calling themselves the Young Turks, that must have been phenomenal. The Young Turks were intellectuals and revolutionaries, Members were diverse in terms of religion, ethnicity, and even class. Second revolution that happened was in Tunisia in 2011. Before 2011, Tunisian youths were in the same predicament that Kenyans youths find themselves now. Unemployment, high cost of living, corruption, and unfulfilled election promises. Then, on 17th December 2010, a street vendor, Mohammed Bouazizi, tired of the regime, set himself on fire, literally, an extreme form of protest, martyrdom. Then the youths of Tunisia took over, on the streets and over on Facebook and Twitter. In fact, the Tunisian revolution is often referred to as the Facebook revolution. Bloggers became activists. As much as the government tried to restrict normal communication channels, the youth took over Facebook and Twitter. It was a revolution of dignity. The only violence came from the government. Tunisians had a 28-day of intense civil resistance. And it was successful. It ousted the regime leader, Ben Ali. And the third case study is the Egyptian revolution of the same year, 2011. The Egyptians learned quickly from their Tunisian counterparts. Using Facebook again, the youth arranged for the protests. They organized youth groups to attend demonstrations and marches. Plazas and town squares were occupied. Nonviolent civil resistance was promoted. Over the 18 days of rage, the then Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak, tried to negotiate his way to peace. He gave concessions, he made promises, but no one was willing to listen to the regime. The youths wanted an overhaul. On 11th February 2011, after 18 days, Mubarak resigned. Another successful youth-led revolution. What you do with this information is up to you. This channel is for information and entertainment purposes and the untold history of our country. As always, I'm yours, Jeph.